Welcome to Health, Wellbeing and Lifestyle. Today our first guest is Heather Belle Murphy, a health, life and love coach, and our topic is, does love paradise exist? Welcome Heather to the show, and please tell me, does love paradise exist or is it just a fantasy?
I think absolutely love paradise can exist, and I think it depends on, really importantly, of course there's several factors, but really importantly, creating a safe space for love communication, particularly when we come across love bumps. So things like, what I've really found when I've been coaching men, and I've come across this several times working with different male clients of different ages, where we may have all, I think a lot of women, we've had that experience where a man is angry and we can't work out why they're angry, and it's actually because they're experiencing what's really under it is vulnerability, and anger often caps feeling vulnerable for men, particularly in the past, where a man may have been instilled with growing up, be a brave boy, put a brave face on it, stop crying. So what do men do then if they've had that kind of learning and that cap put on their emotional expression? They become angry. So this is a really super skill for women to embody, which is to, when a love bump arises, not take it personally. Listen. We don't have to respond, or we can respond in a, let me think about that, darling. Give me some time to think, give me some time to process it. Is this actually pertaining to us or to me? Or is that person just simply feeling vulnerable and being a bit, volatile at that time? So the way you communicate, and I think this comes into my rules of engagement, so that love doesn't become a battleground, where everybody ends up being injured and bloody. So knowing what your rules of engagement are, like even if I bring something to you and it may be a bit bumpy, I'm still going to try and say it gently, and still try and be kind. Now, of course, if somebody has just hit their thumb with a hammer and they're going to explode, well, just let them explode. And of course, people tend to say uncomfortable things when they're in that heightened emotional state, when they're hungry, angry, lonely, tired, HALT, great acronym. So when that happens, you tend to just, if your partner is Vesuvius, just let them blow. Let them blow off steam. In fact, when my partner has classically been a bottler, bless him, so I know that he's feeling particularly safe with me because he comes and he blows his stack to me. Now, I can choose my response because I'm grown up and I'm also responsible, for my response. So if I'm ever a bit offhanded or I raise my voice, even though I feel that I may be right, I apologize because I've spoken out of turn. As we practice, and this is a skill like anything else, as we practice it, we tend to get better at it. And so, again, it's part of that skill set for Love Paradise, a long, sustainable, juicy, intimate love. And I can tell it works because he wants to bring me more and more things.
Could you please elaborate on what a love bump is for our viewers?
There's a big difference between love handles and love bumps. Both are great things. Both are great opportunities to grow. Love bumps arise as a natural consequence of, two people coming up close and personal together for a long time. And what you'll actually find, like any challenge, just like the tide going out, it's actually negotiating the love bumps when they arise. Those bumpy times, when we're vulnerable, when we're angry, when we might be going through a time of loss, a time of grieving. And so we may not be showing up with our best selves in relationship. Now hopefully that's the time when one of us is going to step up. and be there as the rock of support for the other person. And my partner and I joke about this, where it's like you're on that drive and you can't quite find out where you're going. And he hates that because that's part of his masculine thing, and he's an amazing driver, navigator of Melbourne. And so when we can't find somewhere, he will tend to get a bit tense. And I know that's my time to just zip it. If he wants my help, he'll ask for it. And I just sit back and I just enjoy the ride until he says, "Darling, can you get the Melways out?" Or, "Darling, can you Google Map this?" Or, "I think, can you check that the address that we have is correct?" Now, we're both very clear about our love paradise destination because we both love being in it, and we want to make that as sustainable as possible. So, of course, we follow our rules of engagement, particularly when it comes to love bumps or when one of us is in a bit of a vulnerable situation.
Well, thank you for that. And do you have any tips for our viewers?
Yes, absolutely. Of course, loving starts with us. If we don't know how to be kind and generous and loving and supporting of ourselves, we're going to find that tricky in relationship. For women, it's necessary that we become the fountain of love and we self-nurture. And that means that in loving ourselves, in honouring ourselves, in respecting ourselves, we're not going to run into that problem of overgiving. And overgiving is a sure way to end up being taken for granted. And also, and this is a real kicker, it tends to kill his inspired masculinity, which is where he wants to keep giving to us, and having us receive those gifts. So that's a really, really big thing. And the other thing is, of course, heal, eat, love, pray to stay balanced in our daily life every day in every way.
Thank you so much, Heather. If anyone wants more information on Heather Belle Murphy or our topic today, does love paradise exist? You can find her webpage on our website, healthwellbeingandlifestyle.com.au. Now please stay with us and we'll be right back after the break.
Stay tuned. After the break, urban food specialist Marc Noyce is talking about innovative systems that make gardening easier. Welcome back. Our second guest today is urban food specialist Marc Noyce, and the topic we'll be discussing is innovative systems that make gardening easier. Welcome, Marc.
Hi Megan, thank you very much for having me.
Gardening's come a long way. What are some of the latest trends?
Well, let's look at where gardening came from. Where we grew plants in broad acre farming, which we still do. We've been doing that for thousands of years, and it's got us to where we are today, which is fantastic. But most of our population lives in urban cities. We live near the coast, and we congregate in an urban jungle, basically. And we don't have access to those same broad acre farms. We're actually building over our traditional food bowls as fast as humanly possible. So here in Melbourne, for example, our food comes more than 100 kilometres from where we're sitting right now, every day of the week. So we've got to bring in food now from a long distance, and in some cases, some of our food travels thousands of kilometres to get to it. We call that food miles. What we're trying to do is turn food miles into food metres by growing our own food in our backyard or on our balcony. So food has come a long way in terms of how we grow. There are lots of different ways to grow food, and some of the challenges are, how do we do that in an urban environment?
Marc, you've talked about the Wiccan garden beds a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit more about those?
So a Wiccan garden bed is not just like a garden bed in your backyard or a pot, for example. In your backyard, you might have a raised garden bed. It might just be at soil level where you grow some food. You put water on there And quite often that water just goes straight through the garden bed, past the roots, and you're actually watering next door neighbour's trees instead. You put your nutrients on there, you buy some nutrients from the hardware store or the supermarket, and you pour those nutrients on, and they again go straight past your plants, your seedlings, and make your next door neighbour's trees look really fantastic. Gets into the groundwater and it's gone. In a pot, for example, where you pour water on there, it just goes down the sides and you think you've watered your pot, but if you actually break that apart, you'll find that it's really dry. And because when potting mix dries out, it doesn't attract water anymore. So what we want to do is we want to try to hold that water in the pot. So self-watering pots are just a really fantastic way of having a water reservoir in the bottom of the pot and allowing that water to rise up through the potting mix as the plant needs it 24/7. And we call that a wicking garden bed, where if you've ever had a dishcloth in water, you might notice that it rises up out of the water as it travels up the dishcloth. That's called capillary action, it's called wicking, and it's how water can travel up from a water reservoir up through the potting mix and then be available to the plant or the seedlings or whatever you're growing in there whenever that plant needs it. And it just does it naturally. So as it's being drawn up from the bottom through capillary action, a plant reaches down with its roots and sucks it up through suction. So when suction meets wicking, you've got a very happy plant. So a wicking garden bed is a containerised, sealed system that is perched above the water in the soil, so that we're holding that where the plants are for later. Because when it rains, we get a lot of excess rain in our urban environments, and a wicking garden bed captures that in its space for later reuse. So it's very climate adaptive. We can get through a lot of heat waves, and in some cases we can get our plants to survive for weeks at a time in the one containerised system. Let's look at a wicking garden bed. Its elements are: there's a sealed container, there's a water reservoir in the base, which is generally rock, then there's a geotextile layer to separate the rock and the water from the potting mix, then we put our potting mix on top, and then we plant in that, and the water wicks up through capillary action into the potting mix to allow the plants to grow. That's how a wicking garden bed works, or a self-watering pot plant works. There are some advances now where these wicking garden beds have a water reservoir with cones and an air gap between the water and the potting mix, so that we can have free draining and wicking at the same time. And that prevents root rot. You don't want root rot in a container because it goes pretty smelly actually. So by getting a little bit of oxygen, you allow the water to move up through the potting mix, you allow the potting mix to breathe, and I like oxygen and so do plants. So they like to breathe too. Allowing them to breathe gets it much healthier. Allowing the plants to breathe lets them grow more optimally. And so you're going to get the best out of your garden bed if you've got a wicking garden bed that can breathe.
That's fantastic information, Marc. So Marc, what's some advice for our audience in creating their own urban garden bed?
Megan, setting up your own urban garden is actually quite easy. With a wicking garden bed, for example, you can avoid losing all your water, you can avoid having roots come into it from your next door neighbour's trees. You can actually make it very ergonomic by getting it up off the ground and having that raised garden bed so that you're not bending and hurting your back when you're watering or tending to your garden. You can set up an urban farm really quickly these days by having a connectable modular garden bed system that takes the hard work out of gardening. Imagine coming home on a hot day and then you see your garden bed just wilting and dying because you haven't been there to water it. Well, a wicking garden bed solves that. A wicking garden bed gives the plants exactly what it needs 24/7. So certain types of plants can access water all the time versus others that don't like a lot of water can just take what they need, and just more comes up naturally through a wicking garden bed.
Wow, that's fantastic information there, Marc. Thank you. If you'd like to know more about Marc and the innovative systems that make gardening easier, go to his webpage on our website, healthwellbeingandlifestyle.com.au. And after the break, we'll have another interesting guest and another interesting topic.
Stay tuned. After the break, yoga for wellbeing instructor and author Pauline Rooney is talking about chair yoga.
Welcome back. And now we have Pauline Rooney back with us, our Yoga for Wellbeing instructor and author. And today the topic is chair yoga. So Pauline, welcome.
Thanks, Linda. It's lovely to be back.
And chair yoga, how is that? What does chair yoga entail?
If you can do a posture on the floor, you can do it in a chair. And the advantage of doing yoga in a chair is you might have had an injury, you might not feel like getting onto the floor, you may not have the space to get onto the floor, or you might be a little bit more gorgeous in years, so therefore you're unable to get onto the floor. But yoga is all about the three. It's the breathing, it's the posture, and it is the mindset. So therefore, if you can have those three on a mat, you can have those three on a chair. We can do our spinal twists on a chair, just like that. You'd always do it to both sides. Even to the triangle poses in the standing, we won't stand, but you hang on to your chair. I'm a great believer in safety, Linda. If you're on wheels, you must lock them down or have your chair very secure. Safety's paramount. So you'd come out the side of your chair, checking the shoulders not up, that it's down, and you'd ease out like that. Now that's a lateral or a side bend to your spine. Same as on the floor. You do that on both sides, you see. So it keeps the body moving. Any movement is good movement. We don't just do the movement and forget about our breath and our mind application to it. So we would say breathe in and turn, and breathe out, and then breathe naturally, and then breathe in and coming back, and then breathe out. So your breath movement is the same on the mat as it is in a chair. Forward bends, we can bring the legs out a little bit and stretch our spine. You'd never arch up because you wouldn't do that on the mat. So you extend and you come forward. Ankle work. How often have we heard, oh, my ankles are weak and I find it hard to balance or to walk? In your chair, circle your ankles. You'd go both ways and you'd do both ankles, and just that very gentle movement, that will help. The other one that I really like for bone density, hands back on the chair, right foot always slightly forward, and that has to do with the positioning of lifting. When you see people standing, they often come forward and lift like that. That's too much strain. So by putting that foot forward, holding your chair back, you lift from there. It's a straight lift. You can come straight up to stand. But that's enough work. Even if you're unable to lift, you can still push like that. You're still getting the bone density work in your arms. So it's a matter of modifying, but creating the same outcome. It's the outcome, it's the intent, your breath, your mindset. Again, you keep your mind focused. If you're on the mat, you're internalizing what you're doing, your breathing, your posture, your alignment. It's exactly the same on the chair. You're not thinking about anything else. You're really working into that body part. The other one, we often hear people say, oh, but what about our heart rate, the cardiovasculars? We've got that covered in chair yoga and mat yoga. And I like to call this a tushy swoosh, because we're going to hang on and swoosh our tushy from side to side. Slow is great, or you can go quite fast. You're safe because you're not standing up and what have you, and your cardiovasculars will pump along quite nicely. So there's many of those types of things. You can hang onto your chair and move your feet back and forward. Again, that is fantastic for the ankles, the knees, the hip, also the abdomen, because you're lifting to bring your legs out, so that's working there too. There's many things we can do in that chair. All of these will help us in balance, and we all know that we need to balance when we're on our feet. So lifting the leg and extending and swinging back like that, you're strengthening your hip joint area, and therefore, of course, that helps when you stand up, the strength in the hip joint.
So I suppose with people especially with ongoing over the last several years, with more work being done on computers, from work from home, online, no matter what the age group, I suppose that this is something that people can think about when they're having even during the work.
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely. This covers right across the range. Children, they're on games, and the average time for children under the age of 16 is 8 hours, and that's a lot of screen time on top of their schooling time, right? And then I think at 16 and over it becomes 15 hours and more. That I'd be very conservative in saying that. And if they're gaming or chatting to friends, they too can do this, and they don't even realise that they're doing something great for their body. You know, it's really important. And I must say, I notice that both of us smile, and that's a really good thing to do too, because it takes about 16 muscles to smile and 32 to frown. So it's very harsh on the face if you're frowning a little bit too much. So smiling is good. It also changes the mindset, right? So if you're feeling a bit sad and you're sitting there feeling, I'm sad, it doesn't do the mind, the body any good, Linda. So a big smile and a big breath and a little movement will change your day completely. It's really important. And teach our children to do these things. If they can learn at a very early age that it's simple to do, because they're busy. We're all busy. We don't always have time to get onto the mat every day. We might go to a class, but if we do something every day in the chair, we would notice a huge difference. It'd be fantastic.
What would your best advice be for people could take with them today?
Oh, the best tip I could give is what I call juicing up your knees. And our knees get stiff and sore. This one, you blow into your hands, rub them, have your fingers down, because that helps to warm up more quickly. Warm them up, cup your hands. We just have the lightly over there, and it's like a figure eight lying down, and we move our knees around like that about 7 times. That's all you need to do, and then go back the other way. And I can pretty much guarantee you're going to find a huge difference in those knees. They're going to love you so much for juicing them up. It's amazing. If you're in the garden or sitting, anything like that, it's fantastic.
Wonderful. Thanks, Pauline.
You're very welcome.
And we'll be back next week with more amazing guests. But in the meantime, for more about Pauline Rooney and yoga for wellbeing, and particularly chair yoga, then please go to her webpage on our website, healthwellbeingandlifestyle.com.au. And we'll see you next week.
If you'd like to know more about our show, please like our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel.